And good morning. Glad to be with you. Your Home Authority with Bryant Heating and Air on KFOR 1240 and KFOR1240.com. Danny and Reggie from Bryant are in, and they're here to answer your questions as well. 402-489-1240. It does not necessarily have to be specifically on our topic of the day, but if it is, that's good and well as well. Danny, Reggie, glad to have you guys in again as always.
Morning, Chris.
How's the weekend so far?
Good.
Pretty good.
Hanging in there?
Sun's out.
Yeah.
It's not 60, but it's not 10 below either.
There you go. You know, you got to find the silver lining any way you can, and I'll take this over 10 below any day. That's for sure.
That's exactly right.
How are things been going in the shop this week? Anything out of the ordinary, unusual? Maybe some of the same old that you're seeing that we want to let people know about?
Really, what I can't say so much on the repair side, but at least on the replacement side, kind of goes to our topic today about maybe some of the things you need to think about for new construction. Is it seems like all the guys are spending just an awful lot of time going into houses and actually fixing things that weren't maybe done right the first time. And you know, we've talked about this before. I know this is the most difficult conversation with a homeowner when, you know, they've bought a new house and maybe it's 2 or 3 years later and they've just decided that maybe they're not going to live with that. And, you know, they have us come in and check to different things and we start calculating that bill to make that right. And that is sometimes that bill is almost shocking. I know you've had a couple this week, Reggie. I know all the other guys have been running similar calls, and I don't know why we've gotten such a rash of them, but they're almost heartbreaking.
Yes, they are, because it's like I've said before, everybody's home is their castle, and when you go in and you start trying to figure out what we're going to do for that homeowner, it makes it tough, especially when their duct system is way oversized, trying to get it to use it in the house here. So, but that's for homeowners. That's not a fun situation here.
Definitely not. And like I said, you know, sometimes it just comes down to duct not being the proper size. Sometimes it's you know, the equipment not being sized right, either too big, too small. And you know, I know we've got in some houses with a lot of airflow issues. Some of them have sounded like airplanes taking off, and other ones, they're living in about a quarter of their house because they can't live in the rest of their house.
That's
and
correct.
I think we've hit the gamut this week, and so I know we've talked about some of these things before, but we just thought we'd hit on this. Kind of seems like spring. Everybody kind of thinks about maybe new construction, maybe looking at a new house, and you know, all these things are relevant, either whether you're buying or actually even constructing your, as you say, your castle.
Yep.
Well, and it goes to show the importance of the heat loss and heat gain that Bryant does on new construction and current construction too, when you're putting in new equipment, because it really goes to show what you need for the house, because we all know that every house is different.
Yes, there's no two houses the same. It doesn't matter which direction it sets. It doesn't matter, you know, it does in my heat loss and heat gain, but no two houses are the same because everybody's got different windows. They got different style of windows. You have to take all that stuff into consideration when we're looking at things. You know, and in lieu of what Danny said, one of the projects that I think I was involved with here is got a 2-ton air conditioner in there in the house, and we had 4 tons of duct system in there, and I was really shocked. And they were one of his comments that didn't work right. Said, "Well, you know, it doesn't really cool very well in the house during summertime, so we try to shut everything off and try to force it into one area and try to make that work." The whole thing of it is, he said it didn't dehumidify very well, and it's just a really bad situation. It was trying to force more air through that coil than what the air conditioner can actually handle.
Duct work is very important. That's one of the topics we're going to hit on today and talk a little bit about in detail. Also taking your phone calls at 489-1240. Let's go to the phones. Jan has joined the program. Jan, thank you so much for calling us up. How can we help you on Your Home Authority today?
Yes, I have a question. This is concerning heat pumps. I was listening to Problems and Solutions this week with Kathy, and she had the money pit on. And this gentleman from Lincoln called in, and he was questioning, he was going to replace his furnace, and what type of furnace would they recommend. And he stated gas, and then when the gentleman from Lincoln asked him about heat pumps, which is something that most of the newer homes have in them now, the gentleman said it was too expensive, and I was wondering what their thoughts were on this.
Well, to be very honest with you, heat pumps are a very, very good option in Lincoln, Nebraska, as far as I am concerned. I've never had one homeowner say they wish they hadn't have put it in. Now, if you go back 20 years and the way things were designed in the heat pump system, I'd say, yeah, we might have had some issues because there's a lot of cold air syndrome taking place. But with our new equipment today and the way it's set up with our ECM blower motors, I'd love to say it's all the heat pump. I can't say it's all the heat pump because it has a lot to do with Lincoln Electric system down here and their rates. And they're trying to promote using a heat pump. Yes, that you have to use electricity to operate it, but it will actually save you money in the end, especially over gas rates. You never know where gas rates are going to go. They could climb up, they could go down. Summertime, they're usually low, but that's when you need your air conditioner. You don't necessarily need a gas-fired furnace during the summertime. But a heat pump is a viable option here in Lincoln, Nebraska, especially with the electric company backing it up at the same time.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jan, thank you very much for the phone call. And it is something that people are still learning about in the industry. I mean, it's not necessarily a new technology, but it's changing and improving so fast that it's kind of hard to keep up unless you work within the heating and cooling trades.
That's correct. I tell you what, technology, that's a major big word in today because things have changed so much even over the last 10 years in the heating and air conditioning system, not just in furnaces but also in heat pumps themselves with our DC inverter compressors that we got inside of our units. I tell you what, the comfort level inside of a house it has to be right, especially in our industry. People have to be comfortable in their home. If they aren't, then we usually have an issue somewhere.
And, you really at the end of the day, utility costs to some extent drive this decision. We're very fortunate that we live in Lincoln and we have, I don't know where we are today, but at least in the top 10 as far as lowest utility rates. If you lived in an area where, you were in an area where you were, towards the high end of utilities, then gas is probably a more viable solution. The other part of it is I didn't hear his exact question, but heat pumps sometimes, they may cost a little bit more, but with LES, they're actually trying to incentivize people to make that a level playing field by giving some of those rebates. So in Lincoln, Nebraska, that's probably a different answer than maybe other parts of the country. It really comes down to what that utility cost is. If your gas is cheaper, then you're obviously going to look at the gas. If it's electricity, you're probably going to look at the electricity and rates, and heat pumps probably the best answer then.
And through the years and what I've noticed with everything that's going on with gas and the heat pumps, a heat pump will normally recover back your money back to you in that right around that 5-year area. With the rebate programs, it cuts that down even further yet. It cuts it down to where in 2 years, you could recover the money back that you spent extra for the heat pump. If you're comparing, now what I'm trying to say is as long as you're not comparing the high-efficiency heat pump to maybe a mid-range air conditioner or something like that, because then you're comparing apples to oranges. But boy, I tell you what, if you're on the upper end of the air conditioner side of things and the upper end of the heat pump equipment that we have, I tell you what, it takes you about a 2-year period with the rebate that you're getting back from LES to pay it back.
And that's a pretty quick time period.
Very quick.
Very quick.
Very quick.
402-489-1240. If you have a question for the gentleman from Bryant Heating and Air, Danny and Reggie are in until the noon hour. Let's go back to the phones before our first break, and we have Shirley joining us on the line. Shirley, thank you so much for calling us up. How can we help you on Your Home Authority?
Well, I was kind of taken aback by what you were saying about new home construction, and then I got calling in and put on hold, so maybe I missed part of what it. But I can remember 30 years ago being in a home and having somebody come over and a plumber do some remodeling work. And he called one morning and he said, I'm running behind. So when he came, it was a very cold day, and he said something about thawing out pipes, and I go, oh, some of those big old barns up in Havelock, and he said, no, these are new homes. And what does someone building a home really need to do? you rely upon your builder, and you also rely upon the city inspectors that we pay for. You know, when they go in and inspect, what are they inspecting? They aren't expecting to make sure that the, furnace, et cetera, that you're putting in your house is adequate? Or what can a consumer who really is not an expert do to help themselves?
Well, surely the main thing I can really tell you on that is a lot of times when you have pipes freezing up inside your house, a lot of times that's because you have a draft coming in somewhere that somebody either didn't get some insulation in there, right, or they didn't seal off an avenue for that airflow to come from the outside into your home. And that's what's freezing up that pipe.
But my real question was, though, when you were talking about new home construction, that people having to call you guys back 3 years later and saying,
yes,
this house isn't heating. It's kind of this, is it because the builders are trying to keep under cost? What can the average, person who doesn't understand this, who might be having a home built, who is trusting that, things are getting sized, they're trusting that the inspectors that come out from the city are checking to make sure, or is that not part of it?
Well, when the inspectors come out, what they're looking to see is really about safety. When they get into design, they're not the designers, and they don't necessarily look for things like that. Really what it is trying to find a trustworthy contractor. That's really what it boils down to here. Whether or not it's a building contractor or it's a heating and air conditioning contractor, because in my book, I try to take a lot of interest in what is going on with my contractor and how he constructs his house, what he does with it. What I try to find out is what he's doing with even the band joists in your house, and that's the area between your basement and that first floor. And for a homeowner, the thing I would ask is you really need to pay attention to what kind of a builder you have. If he doesn't want to let you know how he does his construction methods, then there could be a problem there. I'm not saying everybody's that way. It's just some guys, all they're trying to do is get the house put up and trying to do it as quickly as possible and turn the house over and move on to the next one.
They ought to have classes for people who are doing things like this. Things to look for when you're buying this or that. We have lots of self-help classes out there, but truly having something like that for, if you're thinking of rebuilding a home, this is a class you should go to kind of get yourself smart.
Yes,
definitely. Yes. You're putting a lot of money into that home. You want it to be done right the first time.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Hey, Shirley, thank you so much. And that's one of the reasons why we are here every Saturday morning is to kind of get some of that information out and why it's so important to ask questions. I'm a firm believer of if I'm spending my money for someone else to do the work, I'm not going to feel bad about asking questions, about saying, how are you doing this? What are you using for that? Because in the end, I'm the one that's supplying the funds for this. I want to make sure it's done correct.
That's absolutely right. And hopefully with today's show, we can at least give you some questions you should ask or some things that you should be getting from the contractor, at least when it comes to an HVAC system. The other hand, the other part of this is we can design an absolutely perfect system. We can design it absolutely correct. All the duct work is correct. But if we don't have a shell that's tight, it doesn't matter what kind of system we put into it. It's never going to heat or cool that residence. So
that's the key thing, Denny. And it's not you could design everything perfect in that system, but it depends not just so much on the builder himself. It depends on every trade that he's got working there. Because everything that's done with the shell of the house, I've always said this in the past, has a direct impact on my heating and air conditioning system that I'm putting in. It has a direct impact, and it always will. When the guy puts in the electrician puts in his electrical, and he's got a light in the room, yeah, the ambiance of the light and everything is a good thing. But everything that we do has a direct feel on your skin, and if you're not warm and you're not cool during the summertime, it has a direct impact on your life, and it takes control of everything.
Like you said in the beginning, your castle should be comfortable.
That's exactly right. When you start doing your heat loss and heat gain, you're taking into account what the windows are. So if those windows don't get installed of how we run our calculations, we're going to be off. If we don't get the thickness of insulation or the amount of insulation in an attic our calculations will be off. So, these are things that we try to definitely look at when we're going back and doing our final checkouts, those type of things in a house, because ultimately, we know what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
And, there's a lot of people that have came into our office up there and wanted to build a house, and they bring their plans into us. We try to educate them, not only just in what we're doing, but trying to give them information. If they're trying to build their own house or they're going to work with somebody, try to give them back some information on the backside so they can at least know what they're looking for. Because let's start asking questions. What kind of insulation are you going to do inside your walls? Because there are so many different things you can do with it. You could put bibs in there. You can get into where you put a layer of foam in that wall cavity and then put the rest of it with bibs. Or you can use a bat in there. All of those play an impact on what you're doing with that house and what you need to do, from my point of view, what I need to do with that house to make it work properly inside there once we're all finished and done.
402-489-1240 is our number for the rest of this hour. Grab that notepad, grab that pen, start taking notes, especially if you are looking to build. We got some important information that you'll want to have handy, especially when it comes to some of the questions you need to ask. So do not go anywhere. More of the show coming up right after this. Glad to be with you today. Your Home Authority with Bryant Heating and Air on KFOR 1240. Talking about new construction and that heating and cooling unit that you're going to have installed. And some of the important things you need to know, some of the questions you need to ask when you are talking with not just your general building contractor, but maybe with the heating and cooling contractor, whoever that might be. We certainly hope it would be Bryant, but even if it is or isn't, some of the important things you need to know. And when we were talking about heating and cooling, as we said in the first segment, the ductwork is just as important as the piece of equipment that's going into the home. So in the end, what's the goal when designing ductwork in the home? What is the end result that you're looking for?
Well, I'm going to start real basic here to begin with. A duct system is strictly, you can't push what you can't pull. If you can't pull the air through the cold air return, you can't push it through your duct system. I've seen some jobs that have such high static on the supply system that when it comes up, it sounds like a jet engine running down through the doggone ductwork, and it's trying the furnace is sitting there trying to whine and dine, trying to push that through. But it's really trying to pull the air through there so we can get the end result to get the air out of that duct system into the room and increase that comfort level inside that house.
Explain static a second for those who may not maybe understand that term, and kind of what are some of the downfalls if you've got too high a static.
If you've got too high a static, as the air is trying to travel, that's a drag inside that ductwork, and you can only push so much through there. And we have used ductulators to actually size the ductwork for the amount of cubic feet per minute that we're actually trying to run through that piece of duct. If you got 1600 CFM and you're trying to run it through, say like a 10 by 20 piece of duct, well, a 10 by 20 piece of duct is only going to give you approximately about 1200 CFM, and you're trying to push 1600 to it. It's hard on the blower. It runs an amp drop on the blower motor. I've seen houses where I've been down there and there's maybe 2 or 3 blower motors setting down by the furnace. Well, the reason why is the duct system was too small. The amp draw on the motor was clear up all the time when it was trying to blow air through that duct system. And what it does then is the oil that's inside those motors, it'll start to, from the heat, it will start to burn away that oil, and it'll get real tacky. Next thing is the bronze bearings that are in some of those motors. It'll start to eat those out. And next thing, you got to change a motor out. Those are the systems that are like that when you get in there. When I come in, I can't put a furnace in. And as a homeowner, for you, Chris, or anybody else, I can't expect it to work. I've got to change the duct system. And my salesman, we have to go in and try to retrofit things so we can make that system work right. So the end result is you as a homeowner is taken care of.
I've heard the term heat runs used as well when talking about ductwork. What are heat runs?
Well, the heat runs are the lines that come off your main trunk line or your main duct system that runs down through the house. That comes off. Those runs can go to each individual room. And each one of them needs to be sized for the CFM that you need in that room. So many houses I see today, and I've seen guys do this. They'll go into a house, they'll run their duct system and on one side all the way down through it, and then they'll everything is a 6-inch sheet run. It doesn't matter if it's a little bathroom that's maybe 5 foot by 5 foot or 5 by 7 foot. They'll run a 6-inch sheet run even into the bathroom. And you don't need that kind of airflow in a little bathroom like that. You only need a little 4-inch run. What they're looking at is trying to get rid of the CFM inside that duct system so they can get rid of it into the house, so they don't really care where it's coming from. And that's the sad part about the situation for homeowners. It's just put the same size piece of duct on everything and make it fit.
So if they were to walk into a house and go down the basement and see that trunk line and they see all the same size lines running off of that, should they be concerned?
It would be a little bit, because I wouldn't know. There's certain rooms that you can't run a 6-inch piece of pipe in there. You may have to have a 7, or you may have to have 2 6s in that same room. And everybody doesn't necessarily always use a ductulator to figure out what they need to have, even with their heat loss and heat gain.
Okay.
402-489-1240 is our number. If you have a question for Danny and Reggie from Bryant Heating and Air on Your Home Authority here on KFOR as we talk about new construction. I've also heard people saying that it's really important to insulate the ductwork, because if you don't, you have, like, say on a cold day, you have the heat going through, all this heat is just escaping out of the metal and all the ductwork, and by the time it gets to your room, you're not getting what you need. Is that true?
Well, if your heating system, the ductwork itself, if it's inside a tempered area where you've got heating and you also have cooling in there, and it's in the enclosed envelope in this house, and it's not up in the attic, no, it shouldn't have to be necessarily insulated. The key thing, though, is what you're wanting to do. The insulation doesn't stop airflow inside that duct system from escaping out. What you need to do is every joint that you have, and our codes here in Lincoln now have changed, so everything has to be sealed. We have to go around, and that has to be all sealed up around the pipes. All of our joints have to be sealed up. And what we're trying to do with that, it's more work for us as heating contractors that we have to do. The whole thing we're trying to get is more airflow and get that airflow back up into the space and not have it leaking down into the basement and all over the place, and get it into the spaces where we need it to go to. It just enhances the homeowners. It's a better system. And I heard earlier, Shirley was saying something about inspectors. Inspectors don't design, and they aren't really into a quality control type atmosphere if they don't know how well somebody's done a job. And that's not really their responsibility. Really, their responsibility is to make sure that things are put in. Safety, that's really all that it boils down to with our inspectors downtown. They're not a design expert down there. They don't have you draw up a duct system and you have to submit it to the city. Someday that may come down the line where that's going to have to be done. And you have to show what your heat loss and heat gain is down here. And the time will come that will happen.
Well, and it just goes to show how important it is to select a trustworthy contractor like Bryant Heating and Air, because you want to make sure that, one, they know what they're doing, and two, they're doing it right.
Yep. You just go ahead, Danny.
I was going to say, we're kind of talking about insulated duct. Talk about duct in, maybe a crawl space or in an attic area. That's probably a different answer.
Yes. And in the crawl space, and especially if it's a vented crawl space, you have to have your ductwork all insulated. In fact, I've got a job down by Sprague that I just bid down there, and we're going to run new duct system back in there underneath the house itself, but it has an open crawl space, and it's got all kinds of flux in there. They can't get any airflow out the registers on their small addition that they've got on the house. That needs to be insulated ductwork. I'd rather see most people use insulated pipe, use pipe, and then put a rapid wrap around it. And on something like that where it is vented underneath there, use R8 so you can get, and that's the insulation value that goes around the pipe.
The higher the number, the better the insulation.
Yes. If you use R4, you got to have some kind of insulation that you're going to be putting over the top of it to try to protect that. Otherwise, you're going to have a substantial leak or air loss or heat loss inside that pipe, or cooling loss. So, and up in the attic, the city down here will let us put an R4. If you put flex up in the attic, they'll let you do that. It has to be all covered up with insulation up and above, like in your attic space. It has to be totally covered that they can't see the flex or anything.
402-489-1240. Speaking of flex, when we come back from the break, we'll talk about what we're mean when we say flex piping. And we'll talk more about that, the importance of the ductwork in your home, when we return right after this. So very glad to be with you on a Saturday morning, your home authority with Bryant Heating and Air on KFOR 1240, as we talk about new construction and that heating and cooling system, some of the questions, some of the things you want to look for. And one of those things you want to look for is the type of ductwork. And one of those types is flex piping. And this is something that we've talked about before, and it seems like every time it gets brought up, there's a shiver that Reggie has. He just goes, oh. He's not a fan of flex piping, and for good reason.
Yeah, and flex, I've walked into other houses that's already been done, and just
Mine.
to see, well, even new construction houses, it's good to see how people do their work compared to what you do.
Sure, yeah.
Trying to see where we need to sharpen our pencils, even what we do, and sharpen the way we do things. The thing of it is, if you take a 6-inch piece of pipe, that'll give you approximately 105 to 110 cubic feet per minute. If you take that and put it into flex, you can only get about 80 CFM, or cubic feet per minute, out of that. You actually need to jump up to a 7-inch to get the same CFM that you're looking for. If you're looking to get 100 or 105 CFM, you need to jump up to at least a 7-inch piece of flex to make that operate.
So what's the purpose of flex piping then, if it seems so inadequate compared to what other people could get?
Well, the reason flex was actually invented is ease of installation. And, a lot of guys just think, well, I'm going to put a 6-inch piece of flex in there because, that's the same as a 6-inch piece of pipe. It's not. It's just not. No matter how, I got ductulators so I can prove it, it's just not the same. You can't get the same airflow through it. If you look at this bungee, the way it flexes back and forth, and if you try to stretch it out, those cones in there, they create that static on the inside of it and stops the amount of airflow that you can actually push through there.
So it creates more resistance for the air.
More resistance for the air, so it can't get out of the other end and get the same CFM that you're looking for.
And is flex easier does it deteriorate faster than, say, normal piping?
Yes, when you have a steel, just a regular steel pipe, that's really not going to ever disintegrate, unless you got some moisture or something on it. I mean, it's gonna outlive your house at the end of the day. Flex piping over time can disintegrate. I know that you probably have a little bit of
That's
experience.
why I asked.
A little bit of experience.
That's why I asked, because it surprised me when Bryant brought the piping down, because there were parts where there were holes and rips in the piping, and I'm thinking, well, how the heck does this stuff? And it kinked up in a spot, and once that stuff kinks, you ever kink a slinky?
That's
how fun is that to get undone?
Yes.
It's kind of the same principle, and really that's what flex. That's a great analogy for flex. It is almost like a slinky that has a covering over it that you expand. So you've got some longevity issues. It was in your attic, so it's easy to get to. It's easy to replace. Just think of this as just say that this is in your basement and it goes behind a drywall, and this stuff disintegrates behind there. Well, you're ripping down drywall to replace that flex. So that's probably, the longevity. It's just, and the airflow. So, I always say if you walk down in the basement and you see flex coming off that trunk line, it's probably maybe a house you want to stay away from. Because you're going to have some longevity issues with that flex.
You may be replacing some ductwork pretty soon.
Ductwork, and unfortunately, if it's behind drywall, you're going to be taking that drywall down.
Yeah, the only way to get to it. 489-1240 is our number. George joins us on the program. Appreciate you calling us up, George. What's your question for the gentleman?
Well, regarding heating and air conditioning unit, I have a heat pump, and with regard to air conditioning, when I change my filter, typically maybe every 3 months at most in the fall, and in the summer I pull out the filter and it looks like there's rust on the filter, and I've noticed this for the last couple seasons. And so my question is, what is that, and is it injurious to the unit, or what?
So on your filter, George, you're saying that it looks like it's rust on it?
Yes.
And that only happens during the summertime?
Yes.
Does your filter ever get wet?
I've never noticed that it's wet. I mean, when I pull it out, but like I say, there could be lines, several lines, where it's like an orange rust color, for lack of a better description. And it's only in, like I say, in the summer when I replace it, or in the fall. In the winter, it is not there.
George, without looking at it, I'd really love to look at that, because first thing I would think of is if it's only happened during the air conditioning, the filtering system is next to your furnace, and if you have a drain pan, is your air conditioner fairly old?
The house
or heat
itself,
pump?
yeah, the house itself is 10 years old. We've been here 5 years.
Okay. What could be happening is the drain pan could be leaking some water down, and what you're actually seeing it is showing up on that filter. I'd have to look at it, especially if it's an orange looking. That would remind me of rust, without actually seeing it.
Sure.
But you could if you wanted to, give us a call, and I'd be glad to come out there and look at that for you.
Okay.
And see if we could try to find out where that's going.
Is that something you'd be able to look at like today, or is it better during the summer when you're actually using the unit?
I have the filter that I pulled out in the fall still here as an example.
Okay.
Okay. But if I pulled out one now, I suspect it would be clear.
Yep. If you have that filter, that would be an ace in the hole here for us, because that would help me try to find out where that's actually coming from. But by coming out to your house, it'll also help me look to see if there's any water coming down someplace else, and try to find out where that's at.
Okay. I appreciate your time.
You bet. Thank you.
George, thank you very much for the phone call. We appreciate it. Hopefully that's something we can alleviate for you. Lines are open, 402-489-1240. As we continue our conversation about new construction and your heating and cooling system, your ventilation system, but also if you have a question about anything in general when it comes to heating and cooling and making sure your castle is comfortable, as we has coined that phrase here on the show, 402-489-1240. One of the things you want to talk to your contractor about is equipment efficiency. There's so many pieces of equipment nowadays, like we just heard there. We heard heat pump. We also have your standard conventional furnaces, but there's so many different numbers, 80%, 90%, and we hear 90% super efficiency and different little tags that are added to that. There's geothermal. There's a lot of information out there.
And you can throw onto that variable speed and modulating, and
there's a lot.
There's a lot.
There's a lot of stuff out there. The thing of it is, if you go into your house and you're buying a new house, or you're having one built, usually if the house is already built, it's pretty hard to get it changed, not unless you can work with the builder and see what you could work out with him to upgrade to a higher efficiency piece of equipment. The thing of it is, the more efficient you can get, as far as what it would do on a 30-year loan, it's going to be minimal. Mm-hmm. That is going to be minimal. That's one of those things that you don't want to have to be replacing all the time. The higher the efficiency, it's going to cost you less to actually live inside that house after you once move into it, compared to a house if you just have base equipment and a base furnace. It's going to cost you more. So now not only do you have to make your house payment, but then your utility cost is going to be a little higher, and everybody's income is different. That's the only reason I say that is, even on a small 1,200 square foot ranch, it's better to actually put higher efficiency equipment in there, because it'll help hold down your utility costs down.
And that's what it comes down to. Obviously comfort is important, but the other side of the coin when it comes to the homeowner is money, is saving money.
Yes.
We don't want to run a piece of equipment, keep us comfortable, but end up costing $200 on the gas bill in the winter, when we can get away with $75 to $100.
You bet.
And that's one of the things that you don't have when you buy a new construction house. You don't have that history of what those utility bills are going to be. Obviously, if you're buying a pre-owned house, you can obviously get what the previous utilities have been. So that's kind of one of the unknown when you buy that new construction house. But just to throw something out here real quick is, we've talked about duct sizing, but what about, in all your bathrooms you have the fans that kick out all the air. Is one size fit all? One fan work for every bathroom?
Actually not, Danny. You should be sizing. And, in Lincoln, I don't know how well. I know in our permit form, I have to, if I put in a bath fan or I'm sizing a bath fan, they want the CFM. You want you to write down the CFM for that bath fan. Some electricians put the bath fan in on new construction. Someday I hope it's to the point where the mechanical guys have to put it in, so they have to size the bath fan that goes in that bathroom. We have a formula that you have to work through for that bath fan to see how many CFM you need in there for the changeovers of air inside there. Some guys do that and some guys don't. Some guys will put a 50, sometimes in a little bigger bathroom they'll put an 80. I've seen some guys in a medium-sized bathroom that you probably could have got by with an 80 and putting a 110 CFM fan in there. I personally would like to see everything sized, and if they want to hold me accountable for it, I'm great with that. I have no problem with that. At least I've got the right proper size of fan. One is getting the right fan in there, but then when you vent it, if you try to use flex all the time, it's going to be an issue as far as getting the airflow out through that flex. I know it's insulated, but I'd rather see pipe. Pipe is a much better for the air to travel through. We don't have high-powered blower motors on the inside of those little fans.
No, those little fans aren't big.
You know, you take a 50 CFM fan, you put flex on there, you're lucky if you get 25 CFM out of it.
Not a lot.
Venting out to the outside.
Before we get to our break, let's get another phone call on the air. Harold joins us. Appreciate you calling us up, Harold. How can we help you on the program today?
Well, I would appreciate some information. I'm woefully ignorant about costs.
Okay.
And I have a 2,000 square foot home, and my AC quit, so I'm looking at doing something, and I was just wondering what kind of a ballpark figure the heat pump would be on something like that.
You know, Harold, I wouldn't be doing you any justice if I'd give you a ballpark figure. The first thing I'd tell you I'd need to do is, and I know 2,000 square feet, that's a pretty good sized house. The thing what we'd need to do is I need to come out and do a heat loss and heat gain on your house. And what we'll do is we can look at two things. See what the model number is on your old unit. We can see what the size of it is. And then compare it to what we need to have in there to actually cool or to heat the house during that winter time. If you go back in with a heat pump. And then we could give you a dollar amount on it. But I would really like to do a heat loss and heat gain first before I give you any kind of dollar amounts.
Oh, well, I had no idea if it was $1,000 or $10,000,
and a lot of that depends on how high of efficiency that you want to get into. You can get into a base unit that, it doesn't qualify for any rebates. But if you want to get into the higher efficiency equipment, you almost should change the furnace at the same time. And I shouldn't say should. You have to get the efficiency out of it, because you got the ECM blower motor, and that's that electrical communicating motor that it uses direct current. And it costs you the same to operate that blower motor as probably an 80-watt light bulb if you left it on all the time. It's very economical. The whole thing of it is, what it does at the same time is it increases the efficiency of any high-efficiency piece of equipment. Something that's 2,000 square feet, it would be very good to get into a 17-SEER unit. It costs you more up front for what you're putting in, but I tell you what, the payback pays back dividends to you for your size of your house.
And like we said before, every house is different, so the equipment's going to be different depending on the need.
Need to look which direction that house is facing, what kind of windows, Harold's got in his house, trying to help him out to size the right piece of equipment, and then also looking at his duct system, make sure we got the right size duct system for what piece of equipment we need to put in there.
So a few variables there, Harold, but definitely something that they'd be more than happy to help you out and give you some numbers and give you an idea of what there is, and work with your budget and see what they can do for you.
Okay, thank you.
Harold,
Okay.
thank you so
Thanks,
much
Harold.
for the phone call. Lines are open, 489-1240. We got to take another break. We'll be back with more right after this. Thank you so much for joining us, Your Home Authority with Bryant Heating and Air on KFOR 1240 and KFOR1240.com. 489-1240 is the number as we continue on here through the rest of this hour up to 12 o'clock. One of the things that we want to make sure you definitely have at your disposal, because this one's all about information, and we're throwing a lot at you here during this show, especially if you're looking at new construction and building and you're bringing in contractors. You trust these contractors to do the jobs they're supposed to do. But it's like anything else, Danny, you always want to have it on paper.
That's exactly right. And we had a caller a little bit earlier. What can you do to some things that you can look at? And I'm going to throw some things out there, and maybe you don't understand it, but at least this is kind of the baseline. If you ever do have any issues, this is at least the testing that they've done. The first thing that you want to make sure that you get is what they call a manual J, or the heat loss and heat gain. It's really ran on a manual J program, but you want to get that heat loss and heat gain from that contractor. And that pretty much will tell you how they've designed it, how they've sized it, and that's a great start. The second thing you want to do is to make sure that the efficiencies that you think you're getting match is get the AHRI certificates. And it's probably a little bit easier in Lincoln right now with LES, because LES actually verifies that you are meeting those requirements. But you still want those AHRI certificates. And then the other thing is when that person comes, at the end of the day, and when they're doing their final testing, they're setting the blower speeds and all these type of things, and you want to make sure that you get all those measurements. They're testing temperatures, rises, and static pressures, and all those type of things. You want to make sure that you get all that information on a piece of paper. And again, you may not know what they mean, and you probably don't care if you never have a problem, but where it becomes so important is if you do have a problem, that information is just invaluable to the person that comes through the door or tries to help you out.
Manual J, AHRI certificates, and get those measurements that they do on the system to specify to your home.
Right. When they do the final checkout, they'll do a number of temperatures. They'll set gas pressures, temperature rises and drops, and they'll check the static pressures and all those things. And those are such important readings. And like I said, you may not know what they mean, and you don't care. You only care if you have a problem.
And if you have a contractor that tells you, oh, you don't have to worry about that, tell them, yeah, I do. Get it to me. Don't be afraid. This is your money. Remember this. This is your home. This is your money. Don't be afraid to ask for the things that they should be giving you. Period.
That's exactly right.
And if they say, no, you don't need that, then you can say, you know what, I don't need you to work on this.
That's exactly right. Really, in our industry, this is almost the basics. This is what you do every time you do these systems.
That's a key thing is, if you have all that pertinent information, and say you are having a problem, and say for whatever reason you don't call anybody back, it gives me if I go back in and there's a problem, or if our service guys, they can see where things were set up. If something's changed, they can tell you very quickly.
I'm going to say it makes the job a lot easier on your end.
It makes it so much quicker on both ends of it here. And then we can analyze what's happened here or what's going on. It makes it so much easier if you have that documentation.
Covering a lot of information here today on the program, Your Home Authority with Bryant Heating and Air, when we talk about new construction and the HVAC system. Let's talk a little bit about the central return real quick. Explain first off what that is and the pros and cons of a central return system.
Well, there's houses out there that actually what they do, mechanical contractors will do. They'll put a centralized cold air return, like on the second floor. It'll be on the hallway out there. And then not put anything into the bedrooms or anything like that. There's a lot of houses out there that do have that. In today's market, the way we do things, we have a centralized cold air return in each individual room. The only room we don't go into and do it in is like in bathrooms. And the reason we're doing that is, say your door gets closed, then it can turn the air over inside the room. The heat comes out or cold air comes out of the register, goes across the room itself, then goes back into the cold air return, back into the system. On a centralized cold air return, you have to undercut your doors at least an inch. And I think some places they say it's 1.5 inches. Just depends on what you're looking for. Depends on how high your carpet is.
Because you get that vacuum effect.
Yes, you got it. That will let the air come out. The biggest problem with a centralized cold air return in the room itself, if your registers are down on the floor, you don't get any cross ventilation. If you have it up in the ceiling, you will get some, but it's always got to pull back towards the door and underneath the door before it finally comes back out.
Does that put stress on the system, on the furnace system? Let's say it's at night and people are sleeping, so they naturally have the doors closed. So you have numerous rooms where the doors are closed, and you don't have that proper circulation. Does that put a lot of strain because it's trying to push air into a room that is quote unquote full, and the air trying to escape cannot get out as fast as the air coming in?
Well, I don't know if it puts any more stress on it. I don't know if the comfort level is as well.
Yeah.
They do work, and nobody in Lincoln that I know of in our codes, we're not into what's your duct system and how everything has to be tested with it. It costs more money to put a cold air return in each individual room. But I tell you what, the comfort level in the end is much greater than what you have with that centralized cold air return. I just don't like everything being pulled through one grill, because for whatever reason, if you do that, then it doesn't always pull from everything, and you may not get it back the way you think you're going to out of your registers. Makes it hard to push what you can't pull.
Let's talk a little bit about the thermostat as well, because placement of the thermostat is important.
It is. The thing of it is, you don't want your thermostat setting into where the sun hits it, maybe in through a window. And I go out on every one of my jobs and try to decide where we're going to put that thermostat. I don't leave it up to any electricians. I mark them so they know where it's supposed to go. What I don't want, I've been in too many times where at first, when I first got into sales, I had electricians putting it in, and I'm not blaming them, but I'd have them put the wire. They put the wire in, not thinking out loud. Well, we ended up going out and having to change it because either I had sunlight hitting it, or it was in the way where when you'd open up doors from the outside, the air was coming back across and hitting it. Sometimes on your second floor, especially on the second floor, guys would take it and say you had an open stairway going up there. Heat wants to rise, so it would hold the heat off if the thermostat was in the hallway. The best place for a thermostat on that second floor, if you have two systems, is inside a bedroom, and one that is going to probably either be the coldest or the hottest that you have. So you can try to get a good even temperature up there and that upstairs. If the heat runs are sized properly and the cold air return is sized properly, everything should balance out if the thermostat's inside of a room.
And Danny, we know you have a choice when it comes to the thermostat. You don't have to go with whatever they tell you goes with the system.
Absolutely. You can get programmables. You can get, your choices are almost endless when it comes to thermostats.
And there's some fancy stuff out there.
There definitely is.
Wireless on your phone, everything else. Well, and one thing before we wrap things up, of course, is always ask those questions. Don't be afraid. Call up Bryant if you have any questions. You can go to BryantLincoln.com. You can go to the Facebook page as well. You can leave questions for them, leave questions for the show. Get the information. Knowledge is so important. That's very, very key, especially when it comes to a homeowner. And the equipment at Bryant, nice thing is you have the 2-year test drive.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So check that out. Guys, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
It's been a pleasure, too. Thank you.
Next week, we'll see if we can continue to load you up with more information to keep your castle as comfortable as possible. And we'll see you next time on Your Home Authority here on KFOR Lincoln. It's 12 o'clock.